Guests and friends, salam and greetings, and welcome to the Hidden Treasure Seminar, co-organized by Monash University and the Asia Pacific branch of the Ibn Arabi Society. My name is Nurul Alam, and I will be the host of today's seminar on Ibn Arabi, one of the most influential mystics in world history. I am honored to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today, Cecilia Twinch, who is joining us from Oxford, UK. Cecilia first came across Ibn Arabi when she was studying modern and medieval languages at Cambridge University. She also studied with Bullen Rauf and joined the large circle that led to the establishment of Bishara in 1971 and the Ibn Arabi Society in 1977. As a senior research fellow of the Ibn Arabi Society, she has been working as a teacher, translator, and editor who has written numerous books and articles and has lectured on Ibn Arabi and mysticism worldwide. She is the English translator of Ibn Arabi's wonderful book of mystical reflections, contemplation of the holy mysteries, together with Professor Pablo Beneto. Her publication also include the book Know Yourself, an explanation of the oneness of being, another very important text in the School of Ibn Arabi. You can also find some of Cecilia's talks and the articles in the webpage of the Ibn Arabi Society and YouTube channel. By the way, I personally adore and admire her works. More precisely, I am one of her fans. I have listened to almost all of her podcasts and videocasts. I have two favorites which I can't withhold but mention here. First one, refreshing repose and a reviving scent, Ruh wa ar-Rayhan. And the second one, arriving at point of departure. I definitely recommend those for you. She is so articulate and so thrilling to listen and learn from. So I'm sure you would love her talk as much as I do. After Cecilia's talk, we will stop recording and we will have around 20 minutes for question and answers. You can use the raise your hand option at the bottom of the participants list to get into the queue. Also, you can type your question through the chat and I will read them to our speaker in due course. My sincere apologies in advance if we do not have enough time to cover all of the questions, as we must conclude the program within an hour. But it is my sincere hope that some questions do remain after the sessions for further contemplation. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to invite Cecilia Twinch for her exciting presentation. The title of her talk is Ibn Arabi and the World of Imagination. Thank you, dear Cecilia, for joining us over the Zoom from a faraway land of our majestic Queen. And the floor is over to you now, Cecilia.
Thank you, Nur Al-Alam, for your very kind introduction. And I'd also like to thank Aydoğan at Monash University for inviting me to speak today, and all those at the Asia Pacific branch of the Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi Society. And greetings to friends from around the world, whatever time of night or day, and a special welcome to those of you who are new to Ibn Arabi. So I'll just share my screen. So as you've heard, the title of my talk today is Ibn Arabi and the World of Imagination. So in this presentation, I'd like to give a broad overview of some of the major aspects of the vast topic of imagination in Ibn Arabi's works. Of course, it's impossible to systematize Ibn Arabi's thought. Apparently, contradictory statements prevent us from fixing his ideas into an edifice of our own making. Nevertheless, certain themes emerge through his writings. And these are writings which are extremely rich in symbolism, poetic images, and the language of illusion, and which communicate a vision of reality beyond the confines of rational thought. In Ibn Arabi's worldview, it is through the light of imagination, as exemplified in the figure of Joseph, the prophet of dream interpretation, that help is extended to artists to translate abstract meaning into concrete form. And I'd like to include just a couple of the numerous examples of how Ibn Arabi's ideas have inspired the creative expression of writers, filmmakers, visual artists, choreographers, architects, musicians, and other creatives in the contemporary world, since the imagination crosses cultural and historical boundaries. As Ibn Arabi says, the imagination opens up a door to experiential knowledge, which thinking cannot reach. For Ibn Arabi, the whole cosmos is seen as a divine self-revelation, which is constantly renewed in different forms at every moment. It is a world of visible signs pointing to invisible meanings beyond the apparent images, and where the aliveness of all creation is speaking to us. The world is imagination, yet in reality, it is real. Whoever understands this holds the secrets of the way. The search for meaning among jumbled shapes seems to be a fundamental activity of the human being. The imagination plays a vital role in this, since it brings together what is seen and what is understood. The pupil of the eye being this empty hole where the brain is exposed to the world and where inside meets outside, is a metaphor for the connection that we need to make between the world of meanings and the sensory world, our interior universe and the external world, the world of spirit and the embodied physical world, the world of clay. Ibn Arabi emphasizes this intermediate role of humanity when he says that the human being is to reality as the pupil is to the eye through which seeing takes place. In our quest for meaning, we scan for signs and indications which will correspond to something we are already aware of in our interior, and we long for the meaning to be present, not far away and unattainable. Of course, this quest for meaning, which at its most basic level is necessary for our physical survival, takes many people to a quest for the holy grail of eternal life, seeking happiness, fulfillment, wholeness, and an understanding of the real place of everything. This may be expressed as seeing God or seeing reality as it really is. It may be found in the human heart, which is potentially the perfect mirror of God, where all is seen truly in one unified picture and where the vision of God himself takes place. The quest is often portrayed as a journey, even though, as Ibn Arabi points out, the journey is only in oneself, and all the signs we follow are pointing at the reality which is already present within each of us. This vision of God or truth has been central to religions and spiritual ways throughout time. Is the vision of the divine possible, or does God remain forever inaccessible, transcendent, and hidden from our eyes? When Ibn Arabi refers to God, he is not referring to a limited concept of the divine that any of us might have. He's referring to a reality without limit, not even the limitation of being described as absolute or transcendent, since God includes everything that is or can be conceived of, whether visible or invisible. Nothing is excluded from this ultimate comprehensive reality. However, when we start talking about different levels of reality and distinguishing between God and the created world, then of course, those distinctions need to be borne in mind. Ibn Arabi often quotes the Quran with regard to the creation of the world. When God wills something, he says to it, "Be," and it becomes. So it is God who brings into existence and creates the world, which Ibn Arabi, like other Muslim thinkers, sometimes calls everything other than God, ma siwa Allah. At this point, we're no longer referring to the absolute hidden essence about which nothing can be said. For already within the single indivisible unity, there is an idea of multiplicity implied by the creator, something created, and all the possible relationships between them. From one point of view, then, Ibn Arabi describes creation as giving existence to something which already exists as an idea or potential, that is, in the mind of God, or else as determining and shaping something which already exists, as in the story from the Quran, which Ibn Arabi discusses, where Jesus creates birds from clay and they become alive. Whatever comes into existence or is created is, in that sense, either brought out from the interior into the exterior, or else it's not an already existing substance that is transformed into a different configuration. From another point of view, we have seen that Ibn Arabi describes the whole of creation as the self-revelation of absolute being, which is constantly manifesting itself to itself in different forms at every instant. Creation is, therefore, a constant process of reality discovering itself. While Ibn Arabi is perhaps best known for his teachings on the oneness of existence, Wahdat al-Wujud, and the true meaning of the human being, perhaps the most distinctive feature of his work is his extensive development of the idea of the world of images and imagination. This is a subject which Henri Corbin so beautifully emphasized in his seminal work, Creative Imagination in the Sufism of Ibn Arabi, since republished with the title Alone with the Alone. Henri Corbin uses the term imaginal world, or mundus imaginalis, to distinguish the world of imagination from a purely imaginary or unreal world of fantasy, since it is a world in many ways more real than the physical world. It is an independent, autonomous world mediating between God and his creation, and it solves the problem, which is perhaps particularly prevalent in Western thought, of a duality between the world of spirit and the world of flesh, the inner world and the outer world, the invisible and the visible, the rational and the physical, the transcendent God and the God who is immanent in creation. It links subject to object in the movement of beauty, which affirms that the act of creation is motivated by love, as expressed in the divine saying, which is referred to in the title of this series of seminars, I was a hidden treasure, and I loved to be known. So I created the creatures and made myself known to them, and they recognized me. Cosmic imagination. Ibn Arabi says, it is he who created them and made them appear within the cloud, which is the breath of the compassionate. And it is through the manifestation or condensation of that moist breath of compassion that what is called the cloud comes into being, which Ibn Arabi also calls the real through whom creation takes place. This cloud is then that within which the forms of the world appear as a movement of love, and this language of longing to bring what is non-existent into existence through creative speech flowing from the compassionate breath is then described as a sigh of yearning to see in an exteriorized form the beauty of what is held within in the crystal clear luminescence of divine consciousness. Ibn Arabi says, everything other than the essence of the real is transforming imagination and passing shadow. No existent thing in this world, the next world, and what is between the two, neither spirit nor soul, nor anything other than God, I mean the essence of the real, remains in a single state. Rather, it changes from form to form constantly and forever. Imagination is nothing but this. So the cosmos only became manifest within imagination. It is imagined in itself. So it is it and it is not it. Or he, not he, huwa la huwa, as Ibn Arabi often says. From this perspective, the whole universe is the presence of imagination within the divine presence. And Ibn Arabi maintains that anyone who does not know the importance of the imagination has no knowledge at all. He says, if not for imagination, we would today be in non-existence. No aim or purpose would be accomplished in us. What Ibn Arabi often specifically calls the world of the imagination is an intermediate realm between the invisible world and the visible world, a world where spirits become embodied and bodies become spiritualized. It is a world where symbols become alive and is referred to as the barzakh, or separating isthmus, the bridge or link between two modes of reality. It must again be emphasized that for Ibn Arabi, this world has an objective reality, independent of any particular human subject. At the same time, it is primarily through the human faculty of imagination, along with the faculties of thought and sensation, that knowledge of the world and the self, and therefore knowledge of God, is obtained. Ibn Arabi says, it is impossible for sense perception or the rational faculty to bring together opposites, but it is not impossible for the imagination. Like a mirror image, something appearing in the imaginal world is both the same as and different to the two sides that define it. It is both sensible and intelligible, and yet neither sensible nor intelligible, just as a mirror image is both the same as the object reflected and yet different from it. Everyone has some knowledge of this interworld because they enter it in their sleep, sometimes referred to as the small or lesser death. If I dream about my mother, I see my mother and nobody else. Yet it is not really my mother, but only an image of her. Most people are only aware of this world of imagination when they are asleep and dreaming. But Ibn Arabi says that once he entered this realm, he never again left it. This does not mean that he inhabited a world of sleep. On the contrary, he had woken up into the earth of reality, and we'll say more about this earth presently. For many Muslim theologians, this interworld of the barzakh, refers only to the eschatological barzakh as a theoretical period between death and resurrection. Ibn Arabi writes at length about this liminal state after death in his Futuhat al-Makkiyah, or Meccan revelations. But he maintains that the person of spiritual unveiling already sees here while they are awake what the sleeper sees in their dream state, or the dead person sees after they have died. The people of God gain a realization of this to such an extent that they perceive it in their state of their wakefulness, but in the barzakh. In their state of wakefulness, they have a state like the dreamer in dreaming and the dead person in death. Imagination is then the widest known thing, yet it's also characterized by narrowness due to the fact that it can only receive meanings through form. The image which exemplifies this wideness and narrowness is the trumpet, mentioned 10 times in the Quran, which traditionally the archangel Israfil will blow twice. The first time, all those in the heavens and earth will swoon, and the second time, they are all raised up at the resurrection. Ibn Arabi mentions that when the Prophet was asked what this trumpet is, he replied, "It is an animal horn of light which Israfil puts to his mouth to blow, the shape of this horn being both wide and narrow." Although the reference here is to the barzakh as a period between death and resurrection, Ibn Arabi goes on to talk about the barzakh in much more general terms. This horn, he says, is the broadest of things, because through its reality, it holds sway over all things and over what is no thing. It gives form to absolute nothingness, the impossible, the necessary, and the possible. It makes existence non-existent and non-existence existent. And with respect to this presence, the Prophet said, worship God as if you see him. And we shall return to this later. Ibn Arabi also specifies here that barzakh is a technical term which refers to something separating what is known from what is unknown, an existent from a non-existent, what is negated from what is affirmed, an intelligible from a non-intelligible. It is intelligible in itself, but it is nothing more than imagination. And in his book of technical Sufi terminology, Al-Istilahat al-Sufiya, he defines the barzakh as the world witnessed between the world of meanings and the world of bodies. Between the two worlds is the world of the barzakh. If you ask, what is the world of the barzakh? We will reply, the world of the imagination. Some of the people of the path call it the world of the Jabarut, power, and so it is with me. The imagination allows us to cross this threshold between the two worlds. Ibn Arabi states that the barzakh is the widest of the presences and the meeting place of the two seas, the sea of meanings and the sea of sensory things. The sensory thing cannot be a meaning, nor can the meaning be a sensory thing, but the presence of the imagination, which we have called the meeting place of the two seas, embodies meanings and subtilizes the sensory thing. It transforms the entity of every object of knowledge in the viewer's eye. These two seas are mentioned several times in the Quran. For example, he let free the two seas which meet together, between them a barrier, barzakh, they do not overpass. And this meeting place of the two seas is where Moses met the mysterious ever-living guide, Khidr, who went searching for water and fell into the fountain of life. Moses, representing in his prophetic function knowledge of the exterior, wanted to meet Khidr to learn about the hidden or esoteric knowledge that is with God. They met at a rock where a fish escaped into the sea, the place where the two seas of exterior and interior knowledge meet. We see here how Ibn Arabi's writing, rooted in the Quran, is rich with stories and symbols which have a deep impact on the soul. As we've mentioned, Ibn Arabi himself usually refers simply to three levels of reality: the world of the invisible, which is the world of reason and meanings, corresponding to the night; the visible world, which is the world of sensation and manifestation, corresponding to the daytime; and the world of imagination, which both separates and joins the two, and is called the barzakh. While from another perspective, God is sheer light, while the impossible is sheer darkness. Creation is the barzakh between light and darkness. In his book, Contemplation of the Holy Mysteries, Mashahid al-Asrar, Ibn Arabi writes, God the Real said to me, light is a veil and darkness is a veil. In the line between them both, you will be aware of what is most beneficial. So follow this line closely. So to summarize so far, we've seen that the power of the imagination is exercised in three main domains. At a cosmic level, the entire creation is imagination. At an intermediate level, imagination is the world between the spiritual world and the physical world. It has an objective, independent reality. And at a microcosmic level, imagination is a faculty of the human mind. And this kind of imagination is dependent on the human subject. It is also dependent on the images that exist in the world and in the intermediate, independent world of imagination. So the human faculty of imagination may combine images in ways that do not correspond to anything that actually exists or that could exist, and may simply be imaginary conjecture or pure fantasy. However, Ibn Arabi maintains that there's no such thing as corrupt imagination. In the same way that sensory perceptions are always true, even though the rational faculty may misinterpret what is perceived, so imagination is always true. What may be incorrect, limited, or distorted is the person's judgment or understanding, as when a dream is misinterpreted. It was whilst he was in Tunis in 1194, when he was 30 years old, that Ibn Arabi entered the realm of symbols, which consists of various realms, including God's vast earth, also called the earth of reality. His entry into it was marked by his uttering a fearful cry during the ritual prayer, which caused all who heard it to lose consciousness, although even the women who consequently fell from high terraces to the courtyard below suffered no harm. The earth of reality is an intelligible spiritual realm beyond the senses, in which the real adoration of God takes place. It is the world that is infinite and has no borders where it would reach an end. From that time onwards, Ibn Arabi tells us, he worshipped God in this other dimension as a complete servant to the true reality. He writes, "Servitude is complete and pure submission in conformity with the very essence of the servant's nature. It is only realized by those who inhabit God's vast earth, which contains both what is happening newly and what has always been. This is the earth of God. Whoever dwells there has realized true servitude and adoration with regard to God, and God joins that person to himself, because he has said, 'You, my servants who believe, my earth is vast, so worship me.'" Ibn Arabi says a great deal about this extraordinary earth of reality and affirms that when the mystic contemplative contemplates that universe, it is himself, his own soul, that he contemplates in it. In chapter 8 of his Futuhat, Ibn Arabi gives the following account. After God had created Adam from clay, some clay was left over, and it was from this clay that God created the palm tree, so that this plant is Adam's sister. After the creation of this palm tree, there still remains some clay, the size of a sesame seed. And it was in this remainder of clay that God laid out an immense earth. He arranged in it the throne, the firmament, the heavens and earth, the worlds underground, all the paradises and hells, so that the whole of our universe is to be found there in that earth in its entirety. And yet the whole of it together is like a ring lost in one of our deserts. And in comparison with the immensity of that earth has hidden in it so many marvels and strange things that their number cannot be counted, and our intelligence remains dazed by them. While the kind of imagination that depends on the human subject is generally transitory, the advent of motion pictures has created another level of reality which has a more lasting effect and which may emphasize light or darkness. The ability of filmmakers to manipulate images which can be projected into a kind of collective dream can have a great effect. In representing the dreamlike quality of the physical world, we see a world that is full of signs and symbols in the same way that dreams are. And Nasser Hamir's film about Ibn Arabi looking for Muhyiddin is an example of this. However, it is up to us to make sense of those signs and symbols and interpret them. Abbas Kiarostami, the late award-winning film director and photographer who used to lead film workshops at IBAF, the International Ibn Arabi Film Festival held in Murcia, Ibn Arabi's birthplace, each year, had a particular connection with trees. He quoted Ibn Arabi as an inspiration when he said that the tree is the sister of man, and he confirmed to me that he was referring to this story of the palm tree as Adam's sister, and of the hidden portion of clay the size of a tiny sesame seed that contains the vast treasure house of images the earth of reality, which provides all that the imagination sees with the inward eye. This imaginal world is referred to by various names by earlier writers and is also found in pre-Islamic traditions, as in the Zoroastrian tradition. In the Persian Sufi tradition, which of course coincides in many aspects with the Arab Sufi tradition, this world beyond ordinary space and time, which nevertheless still has dimension and extension, is called Na Khoja Abad, the city or land of nowhere. It is to be found beyond the cosmic mountain of Kaf, of which Ibn Arabi also writes, saying that according to tradition, it surrounds our universe, and he relates a conversation with a serpent that encircles the mountain. The Nobel Prize-winning Turkish author, Orhan Pamuk, begins his novel, The Black Book, with a quotation concerning Ibn Arabi and this mysterious realm that is hidden from those who are confined to a world of what they believe to be scientific fact. The epigraph to the Black Book is as follows. Ibn Arabi writes of a friend and dervish saint who, after his soul was elevated to the heavens, arrived on Mount Kaf, the magic mountain that encircles the world. Gazing around him, he saw that the mountain itself was encircled by a serpent. Now, it is a well-known fact that no such mountain encircles the world, nor is there a serpent. Later in the novel, one of Orhan Pamuk's characters points out that despite the differences between East and West, in both traditions, there exists the idea of a center hidden from the world. And there is a continuing fascination in the novel with the idea of whether the universe is full of meaning or devoid of it, or whether this simply depends on the mindset of the observer. Since at least the time of Plato's allegory of the cave, many authors in both the East and West have likened our life in this world to a dream, or a dream within a dream, or a shadow of what exists eternally. Shakespeare said, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep, and all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." Ibn Arabi similarly presented this metaphor of the world as a shadow play, where images and forms appear on a screen illuminated from behind. He writes, "In the eyes of small children, who are far from the veil of the screen set up between them and the person who manipulates the figures and speaks through them, who is it that speaks within these forms?" Ibn Arabi says that the situation is the same with the forms of the world, where most people are like those little children. He explains, "Know that what is generally said to be other than God, or the so-called world, is in relation to God like the shadow in relation to the person. The world in this sense is the shadow of God. And know that your imagination and all that you perceive and about which you say, 'That's not me,' is imagination. So the whole of existence is imagination within imagination." Ibn Arabi asserts that everything within which we are is the dream of the real. And your awakening through death is like someone who dreams that he wakes up in the midst of his dream and says, "I dreamt this and that," and supposes he is awake. We already mentioned that when the Prophet was asked what the trumpet is, he replied, "It is a horn of light, which Israfil puts to his mouth to blow." Ibn Arabi explains that it is made of light because light is the cause of unveiling and manifestation. If it were not for light, eyesight would not perceive anything. And God made this imagination a light through which are perceived the representations in form of everything, whatever that may be. Its light penetrates absolute nothingness and gives it images of existence. Therefore, it is more deserving of the name light than the entirety of created things described as luminous. In speaking of the world of imagination in the chapter on the wisdom of light in the word of Joseph in his Fusus al-Hikam, or Ringstones of Wisdom, Ibn Arabi says that although it may seem to us that what we call the universe or everything other than the real is something additional, self-subsistent and exterior to the real, in reality it is not like that. Have you not observed, he asks, that the shadow is attached to the one who casts it? And would it not be absurd for it to become detached, since nothing can be disconnected from itself? Therefore, know your own essence, Ein, who you are, what is your identity, and what your relationship with the reality. Of course, the shadow is nothing but an image of its reality. But do we want to stay with the limited form of that image or pass beyond it to the single reality itself? Ibn Arabi frequently deals with the matter of imagination, dreams, and their interpretation in terms of what is real and what is not, and at what level. And again, in the Wisdom of Light, in the word of Joseph, he mentions the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, "People are asleep, and when they die, they awaken." Ibn Arabi points out that the whole life of Muhammad was like a dream within a dream, revealed in the world of imagination. And it is for this reason that there is symbolism. The reality which one form possesses appears in another form. But for Muhammad, it was a true dream, where the images seen in sleep were interpreted with the meanings intended for them, so that everything that happened to him, he interpreted according to the meaning that God intended. When the Prophet Muhammad was offered milk in a dream, he took it and interpreted the milk to mean knowledge. In reality, the meaning was knowledge, but it was perceived in the dream as milk. Ibn Arabi is exhorting us to wake up whilst we're in this world and see the reality of what is revealed to us now before we die the death of the body. We are advised to take notice and go beyond the dream images, reaching up to their real meaning, just like the Prophet when he was given a bowl of milk in his dream. Ibn Arabi advises us, so wake up, you who are asleep and unmindful of all this, and pay attention, for we have opened up for you a door to experiential knowledge which thoughts cannot reach. Therefore, the point is to wake up from this dream and perceive the reality. The images and signs can help us to do this if we are able to pass beyond them and cross over into the world of the real. Ibn Arabi frequently quotes the Quranic verse, "We shall show them our signs on the horizons and in themselves until they see that he is the real." So we need to pierce the veiling screen by means of symbols which transport us to deeper meanings and explore the depths of the self until we reach the reality behind the veil. In reality, in regard to God's name interior, the forms of the cosmos are related to God, like the forms of a dream to a dreamer. The interpretation of his dream is that these forms are his states, so they are not other than he, just as the form of a dream are the states of the dreamer, nothing else. He only sees himself. Apart from true dreams, which are extremely rare, dreams require interpretation, for symbols may appear in different forms according to the plane of reflection. For example, Ibn Arabi tells us of how Abraham dreamt that he was sacrificing his son in the form of a ram. Abraham omitted to interpret the dream according to its reality and proceeded to sacrifice his son, taking the dream as he saw it. However, in reality, it was himself that he saw being sacrificed in the dream, and through asking for guidance, he became aware of a different level of interpretation. Joseph dreamt that he saw 11 stars with the sun and moon prostrating themselves before him, and interpreted this dream as coming true when he received his parents and brothers in Egypt. In other words, he took the meaning down to the level of its appearance in the sensory world, even though imagination only manifests in what is perceived by the senses. But Ibn Arabi points out that the Muhammadian Joseph, or that aspect of Joseph which corresponds to the complete mirroring of the matter, would have connected the meaning of the dream to its spiritual reality with God. Not only do images and dreams usually require interpretation, but so do the images we see in the sensory world. Ibn Arabi recounts the story of Solomon, who attacked Bilqis, the Queen of Sheba, with eternal relationships of love and aspirations of compassion, inviting her to come to him as a Muslim, that is, in submission to the one God. He asked his courtiers if anyone could bring her throne to his palace before her arrival. One of his knowledgeable companions brought it in the twinkling of an eye. Bilqis was asked on her arrival whether it was her throne, and she replied, "It is as if it were the same." This refers to the likeness of the images of a thing at two different moments in time, like the distinct frames of a film which run into each other in a continuum, the images resembling each other. But Ibn Arabi emphasizes God's new creation at each instant. The throne was not brought across space, but appeared anew at that moment. Solomon made Bilqis aware of this new creation when he invited her to enter his palace. There was water beneath. The palace floor was smooth like marble and made of clear crystal. There was water beneath it, with fish swimming in it. And when Bilqis saw the floor of the palace, she thought it was water and lifted her skirt, baring her legs so her dress would not get wet. Here again, she was confused by the likeness of images. At that moment, her illusion was lifted from her. She realized she had been oppressing her own reality and surrendered with Solomon to the Lord of all the worlds. Ibn Arabi says, "The people of unveiling see that God reveals himself in every breath and that the revelation is never repeated. They also see by direct witnessing that every revelation brings a new creation and takes away a creation. Therefore, its disappearance is the same as its passing away at the same moment as the self-revelation, and its continuation is due to what the next revelation brings." Human imagination is a faculty of the soul which mediates between the divine spirit and the dense body, the luminous immaterial dimension and the dark shadow of the material world. Ibn Arabi indicates the need to attend to the spiritual light so that the bodily darkness loses its hold on us, at the same time as acknowledging the real place of the body and integrating every aspect according to its true balance. We each have our own storehouse of the imagination, containing images from the inner and outer worlds. But of course, how veridical or true our imagination is depends on the purity of our hearts. Our imagination may be entirely occupied with the sensory world or clouded by animal appetites and desires, so that of course it produces all kinds of fantasy which lacks correspondence with the objective reality of the imaginal world. Images seen through the lens of our lower appetites, hunger, sex, power, greed, luxury, money, and so on, do have a reality, but a limited one. Alternatively, at a rational level, our imagination may be in service to our own partial and relative supposition and opinion. We're so busy pursuing our own thoughts that we do not see the real picture. Either way, we are clouded by our own limitations. It's only when our imagination is in the service of the total intellect that we are able to reflect what is real. Ibn Arabi quotes the 10th century Sufi mystic Junaid, who said, "The color of water is the color of its container." This applies both to the lower desires and the higher desires of spiritual ambition. But we need to uncover what we really are, not according to our own delusions, but according to the divine imagination, the divine creation. This is not an imposition of God's, but occurs according to his knowledge of us. And since knowledge is subject to the knowing of us is according to the picture that we ourselves have chosen and presented to the reality, a picture that is still in the making, even though outside of time it has been known in all eternity and is the vision of us as we really are. Ideally, we would not invent ourselves according to the idols we create and serve according to our desires, but would aspire to serve reality so that it appears in the heart unconditioned by a limited imagination. And the forms in which that reality reveals itself are constantly changing. The eternal youth who speaks to Ibn Arabi at the Kaaba, which represents the holy temple of the heart, said, "Whoever restricts me to one form rather than another is really only worshipping what they themselves have imagined." Spirits need to take on a form in order to appear to human beings. The angel Gabriel's appearance to Mary at the Annunciation is described in the Quran in the following way. He appeared to her in the image of a man without fault. There is also a famous hadith or saying of the Prophet concerning Gabriel, when he came to see the Prophet appearing in the image of a Bedouin. The Prophet's companions didn't recognize Gabriel as an angel and tried to turn him away, but Muhammad told them to bring him back. The angel, in the form of a man, then questioned Muhammad about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Islam means submission to God. Iman means faith, and Ihsan means doing beautiful actions. The Prophet then explained to his companions, "This is Gabriel who has come to teach you your religion." When Gabriel asked Muhammad, "What is Ihsan?" doing beautiful actions, Muhammad replied that it is to worship God as if you see him, and if you do not see him, indeed, he sees you. In this sense, the imagination plays an important role by representing a form in which the divinity is worshipped and towards which the worshipper who desires union with God turns in yearning and longing. The worshipper who does not actually see God is encouraged to imagine God in their center of orientation, Qibla, so that they face him and imagine him there, present with them. Reason would deny that such a thing is possible, for God is abstracted far away from having any form. But the Prophet also said, "God is in the Qibla of the one who performs the prayer." And as the divine saying affirms, "Neither my heavens nor my earth contain me, but the heart of my faithful servant contains me." This is the God that is believed in, worshipped, and established in the heart of the worshipper. So as Ibn Arabi points out, the imagination has given form to the one who, according to intellectual proof, cannot possibly be pictured or given form. And finally, Ibn Arabi writes, "Everyone who falls in love with something only falls in love with it after actualizing it in their imagination, setting up an image for it in their imaginal faculty, and making their beloved coincide with their image. If this were not the situation, then once the person separated from their connection to the beloved in terms of sight or hearing or other faculty of the senses, they would also separate from their connection to that person. This shows that the beloved exists with the love in the image of a form, and that they have brought the beloved about in their imagination. This is why we are enjoined to worship God as if we see him, by forming an image in the heart which can encompass him, so that he is contemplated as actually present. Yet there is another allusion hidden in this prophetic saying about the Ihsan, which Ibn Arabi often refers to, and which he explains in his Book of Contemplation in Annihilation. This injunction can equally well be read and translated as, "Worship God as if you see him, and if you are not, you see him, and indeed he sees you." For it is when you realize that you have no separate existence and that only the real exists, when you die to yourself with a mystical death, then it is God who truly hears and sees in this place of his self-revelation. When my beloved appears to me, with which eye do I see him? With his eye, not with my eye, for none sees him but him. Thank you.